This episode of the podcast is brought to you by New Bloom Labs.
New Bloom Labs is leading the industry with potency testing of Delta 8, Delta 9, 2 isomers of Delta 10, and a dozen other major and minor cannabinoids that are shaping the industry. And they just announced the expansion of their standard potency panel that reports 16 different cannabinoids. The new additions include CBD, VA, and both isomers of Delta 10 THC. These now come standard on every potency analysis that New Bloom Labs reports. If you have ever questioned your lab's potency report of Delta 8 products, try New Bloom Labs. New Bloom Labs will deliver the most precise Delta 8 analysis in the country and show you the raw chromatography to back it up. Give them a call today at 844-TEST-CBD or visit their website at newbloomlabs.com. Superior science, rapid results, New Bloom Labs.
This episode of the podcast is brought to you by our friends at Regrow, the premier cloud-based cannabis supply chain management system.
Are you using whiteboards, spreadsheets, and email to manage your cultivation, distribution, and manufacturing processes? If so, it's a good time to consider incorporating Regrow to automate your manual tasks, reduce costs, and avoid shortages to create dynamic workflows that maximize yields and increase profitability for your business. Regrow is the single pane of glass view into your entire supply chain. The supply chain management system is available globally with native localization and foreign language support. If you're a cannabis company searching for a strategic business partner to help you automate your business, scale effectively, and make the supply chain work for you, you can find Regrow at regrow.io. That's regrow.io. Regrow, the premier cloud-based cannabis supply chain management system. Hello, my fellow people of the plant. Kevin Carrillo here, and welcome to another episode of the Cannabinoid Connects podcast. My guest today is Rena Sherbill, host of the Cannabis Investing Podcast and senior editor for Seeking Alpha.
Exciting, I think, to...
I'm recording, by the way.
Record away. I've come ready to be recorded.
Go ahead. What were you saying? Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
No. You were just saying how excited you are in this unexciting, uninspiring, sometimes soul-crushing world that we live in. How exciting it is to look at our investments. And I think, yes, for sure. And also just like being a part of the industry, I think is really exciting. There's like changes happening upon changes happening. And I feel like exciting to be a part of an industry that I think is like learning some lessons along the way as it's growing, and it's nice to be a part of.
No, I'm totally with you. In addition to the investments, which of course is nice, is just being a part of the industry. You nailed it. Because like, I can't tell you, man, if I hadn't made this move, it'd be rough. I mean, it'd be just trying to get a job, trying to not focus on all the, politics and just conflict and everything that's going on that you see in the news and whatnot. It's a great distraction. It's a good kind of focus area to learn more and grow and meet awesome people. I've loved it, Rena. It's been great.
Agreed.
Cannot complain. So what is new with you? I gotta say, I'm so excited to talk with you because it's been like almost not quite 2 months, but like a month and a half.
A little less, yeah.
Yeah, and so much has happened. So I just can't wait to hear all of like who you've been talking to on the financial side and like, yeah, what's all going on with you.
Same. I'm excited to hear from you too, Kevin. I might turn the table, so get ready.
No, go ahead.
There are. It's exciting. I mean, we haven't talked since the elections, right? We talked right before the elections.
It's before the elections, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, that's crazy. Like, I think total bullish, votes happening in a way that I think even people that were bullish on everything going kind of the green way, in terms of favoring cannabis legalization, I think everybody across the board, total bipartisan issue. And then I think the cherry on top of that was Georgia, which I think did surprise a lot of people. I think
it did. Yeah.
Yeah. It's wild, It's funny. I had somebody on the show the other day, and I was asking them if they think that everything happening in the States is affecting other countries and other countries' decisions to go legal or to even talk about it. And as you know, I'm in Israel, and I think I talked about it, if not last show, then the show before that, how we were so excited that there was this announcement, that Israel was going to go adult use legal. They were promising within 9 months.
Yeah.
That's since been changed because of new elections. But I believe it was Kyle Detweiler, the CEO of Cleverleaves, who said he thinks Israel announcing that was a direct reaction of Biden getting elected, and they think
Wow.
they wouldn't have announced that otherwise. And that's crazy, Like,
Yeah.
I mean, it's crazy and makes a ton of sense, but it's just in terms of everything being connected to each other. And I think the other exciting thing that I'm seeing that I think is happening right now that is really like great to see is not just kind of like a soundbite emphasis on righting these terrible, social inequalities that have been happening as a direct result of cannabis for way, way, way too long. Um, it's nice to see companies like really doing something about that. It being entrenched in the communities more and more. Um, and I'll kind of piggyback that with the other nice thing is like the influx of money, which is coming with the SPAC world. And I
Right.
don't mean to kind of take out the importance of social equity, but I mean to talk about it in tandem because I feel like with the SPAC world, and full disclosure, the SPAC I'm really excited about is I think you saw me tweet about it and write about it, is the parent company, which is from Subversive Capital. Um, and there's a company that I'm most excited about business wise, like in terms of where they're going to get business wise, and in terms of where they've already gotten, honestly, but also what they're doing, on the social justice side. It's Jay Z,
Yeah.
so obviously, they're going to be tuned into that part of the industry. But they're signing up for the Robert Smith Initiative, which is giving back to historically Black colleges. They're being entrenched in communities. They're not just like paying lip service to it. It's not just philanthropy. They're like raising people up how to do investment banking, how to make a, do applications, how to get certified, like all these things. So I feel like we're seeing a maturation of the industry. But I think along with that, it's also nice to see a maturation on the social side, not just on the business side. And that is, yeah, it's promising. It's obviously not happening with all the companies across the board, but
Right.
the companies that it's happening with, it's really inspiring, I feel like. And how we were saying that it's exciting to be a part of that. It's exciting to be a part of that change, like there's a lot of emptiness in some businesses, and certainly there are sides of this industry as well, but I think there's also like a lot of meaning that's being put forth, and yeah, really, really just happy to be a part of that
Yeah.
in any way and to see it happen.
It feels so good to be to be on the right side of history,
Yeah,
and what I
right.
mean by that is not only these wrongs being undone, right? Because again, it's a plant, and we're finding medicinal value in it every single day. Um, but to your point of all the social equity, and we're addressing that, but also I'm seeing studies now that more cannabis use is leading to less opioid use, right? So we're kind of even counteracting some of these pharmaceutical drugs in a way, right? I mean, we still got a long way to go there, but what I'm saying is at least the discussion is happening, So there's
Absolutely.
so many good things that are happening. That's why I say it's exciting to be on the right side of history. And when you mention the momentum with Biden entering office, the sweeping of the Democrats in the Senate and the House, and how that's a domino effect globally. I mean, absolutely. And I can see it in my investments. I know when we talked last time, you really kind of opened my eyes in terms of some of the companies that I had prior invested in, right? I mean, this was like back in 2018, and it was a lot of my focus was a lot on Canadian stocks. But after our conversation and just kind of seeing the market and listening to your podcast and other financial experts, I've totally been focused on the MSO market or MSOs, and it's been amazing. And my point is that you see that domino effect because the US stocks MSOs are taking off, and the Canadian stocks are just kind of barely starting to get up there now. You know what I mean? Because of all the action that's happening here in the States. It's incredible.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Like it's exciting to see. And I think it's really gratifying, because I think when I got started doing this podcast, I started, in April 2019, and I've said this before on your show that it was, and just as you're saying, it was Canada, Canada, Canada. What's coming out of Canada? It is so exciting. They're going legal. Da da da. But even and look, I mean, I'm not gonna I make no bones about it. When I was like interviewing, the COO of Aurora in April of 2019, I was like, yeah, like yeah, you're going global and you're going to Europe and Israel and you're expanding here and you're opening this. But like the more after you stop talking to somebody that's really exciting to talk to and has all the, once you peel things back, it was like less and less exciting. And I feel like once I started talking to the US MSOs, I would be like, oh yeah, that sounds great. No, no, no. And then like you keep pulling it back and you're like, oh yeah, that does sound great. And like,
Right.
oh yeah, that does sound great. And even when people were being so bearish on them, I mean, my example is always True Leave. Like when I started talking to Kim and talking about that stock, like people were like, there's something shady going on in management. There isn't, they're only focused on Florida. That's a detriment. It's not, and so it's just been like so exciting to see kind of everything fall into place to make that narrative like work. But at the
Right.
same time, I think the right companies were always at the top, and I'm excited to see a couple more coming in. I mean, Air Strategies, I think, is another one that we've
Are
talked about on the show before.
are they merging with health sciences?
Liberty Sciences.
Liberty
Yeah.
Sciences. That's right. Okay.
Great
So
question.
well, so hey, I'm telling you, I'm getting in tune with it, and I actually own previous stocks of Liberty Health. So, what are the implications there? Like, what happens? Because I'm still learning, all this, and it's awesome. So, like, what does that mean?
Well, I actually feel like this was like more synchronicity about, the podcast. And I think it's interesting. I wanted to talk to you about this because I feel like you've been doing the podcast for a while, and I imagine like you've learned some things and like kind of see this arc. And I feel like it took me a while to kind of understand what my arc is. Like, I know that I'm focusing on investing in the cannabis space. I know that I'm coming from Seeking Alpha, so there's this financial, acumen that we need to be
Sure.
bringing, and it can't just be surface level. But I think I experimented with like, am I somebody who's like, buy this now, or buy these stocks now, or just invest for the long term, or broadly speaking. And I think what I'm seeing is what my show can bring, is what the Cannabis Investing Podcast can bring, is I feel like putting some context on the investment side of things. So like one of the things, and again, like I'm learning along with it, right? Like my
Yeah.
background is much more in the journalism space than it is in the financial space. So I'm trying to kind of trying to use like who we have on Seeking Alpha. So and I think I talked about this. Like we did this like master class in cannabis investing with Julian Lin, who has like a marketplace service at
Right.
Seeking Alpha. Right, you can sign up for a service. He's like newer to the industry, and then we have James Baker, who's much more experienced, seasoned, really a character. And so kind of having those two voices and viewpoints kind of duke it out. And in the second episode, James is like an activist investor in Liberty Health Sciences. So he's been fighting for it to be, if not taken over, like, remanaged and kind of like
Yeah.
addressing some of the issues that they need to address. And he was saying that he thought Air Strategies would be the perfect company to come and take that company over. And he was saying that he said that to the CEO. We released the episode like after we finished recording that. It was a podcast where I was like, okay, we're pushing this to the top of the queue. This is like
Right.
good stuff. We put it out there, and the next day, Air announced that they were doing that deal with Liberty Health, and I was like, whoa,
It,
that's crazy.
it's when you say context, it's almost like you mentioned, you have the experts in house, especially at Seeking Alpha, right? Major financial publication. So like from there, it's like just get that content out. You know what I
Right,
mean? Like
right,
just get it out, and in that case, it's timely because if
right.
it's top of mind and that's what your experts are seeing, then boom, like
Yeah,
more than likely
yeah.
it'll happen. And if it doesn't, at least you're in the conversation. I mean,
Absolutely.
yeah.
Absolutely. And yeah, exactly. And when people are, like talking to all the different players and have like a worthwhile opinion to kind of churn that through and then give out is, yeah, I mean, that's the best kind of analysis. Yeah,
So
so you
so
asked
is
about.
that your arc? Is that what you're finding? So like in addition to awesome insights when it comes to investing and the financial market as it relates to cannabis, you're also seeing that there's a story to tell, right? Like
Absolutely.
yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, like trying to I don't want to be I don't want to be spoon feeding anything. I want to kind of like be putting it in a way, I kind of got taken to task, and there's these things like this that I'm about to say, like um I feel like as producers of content, which, I'm sure you find this as well in terms of like people that give constructive criticism, even if it's not just constructive feedback, but like constructive criticism. I think it really, like, if it's constructive, it really stops and makes me think. And I tweeted something
Oh
like,
yeah.
yeah, like right around the Georgia elections, we had this great article on U.S. cannabis companies, and I tweeted out a line that was like his over the off. It wasn't my piece. It was D.H. Taylor's piece, and he was saying how, across the board, like, revenue looks good on U.S. cannabis companies. But that's obviously a broad statement, and I tickered like a bunch of U.S. cannabis companies, ones that he was just using for comparison purposes. And somebody that I've been back and forth with on Twitter, like in a good way, like we keep in
Sure.
touch on Twitter, was like, don't include all those tickers, because then, people see that and they're like, oh, revenue's high across the board for all these tickers. And he's like, what you guys are doing is bringing some context, not like, yes, cannabis stocks, buy anyone you see, it doesn't matter, like. And I was like, yeah, you're right. And it reinforced something like that I had already been thinking and trying to do anyways. But it's
Well,
nice to
well, and you do that. So like, sorry to cut you off, but I want to make sure, like, when I've talked to you before, you've always kind of talked about the core, core competent companies that are really, really, making move. True Leaf's been one, right? Grow Generation, all these different companies that are doing awesome. And but like, he's right in the way that you don't want to, you kind of tell the story instead of just kind of throwing it out there, because that was kind of my mentality before with the Canadian stocks. I just bought everything, back in the day, because I thought this is just going to explode one day. And then of course, just like in every market, right, there's the winners and the losers. And so I see what he's saying in that point.
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, so that was like a nice reminder. And to get back to your original question about the Liberty Health deal, where it's going, I mean, I know like James Baker is not wanting that deal to go down. He's very, it voices his opinion very strongly and clearly. There's a whole slew of investors that want that deal to go down, that thinks that Air is going to be a great steward of their capital in a way that Liberty has not been able to do so far. Like, that there's a great kernel of a company there, but I think with management, and as Air has shown, they've been a great manager of their own capital. So I was supposed to talk to John this week, the CEO of Air Strategies, and it's been delayed, but I hope to have that interview out before the deal is voted on. I'm super, super excited to talk to John and get kind of like more clarity about that deal, but we'll see. I mean,
Yeah.
it's interesting. I don't think either side is 100% right, and I don't think either side is 100% wrong. I think a lot depends on what happens once if the deal is signed.
Right, right.
But it's promising. I mean, it's promising, and I think a sign of like where the industry is going and growing. In terms of these companies that have built themselves up, and Air isn't that old, right? They're not like True Leaf, who like you could have gotten in a year ago at $4. Like, they haven't been around that long. And they're kind of just doing things right out of the gate. And now they're able to kind of like take this smaller company and raise it up. And I think that's what we're already starting to see it. And I think we're going to see it more and more throughout the industry.
Yeah, I gotta look because I have my TD Ameritrade up. So $4 a year ago at True Leaf. Right now they're trading at $47.15.
True Leaf is amazing. I mean, I've seen people say that Kim should be on the cover of Forbes. I remember just talking to her once and then following the company. And the second time, I think my intro said, like, when they're discussing these days of the green rush, of like the beginning of real cannabis investing, they're going to be talking about Kim Rivers. I mean, she is like a total rock star in the industry, just doing things so completely right and right on. And in terms of like being there for like the investors, and also being there for the customers, and just like being very public facing. And then just being a great steward of capital. I think
Right.
just really, really smart. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, when we talked last, I remember you saying like, their price target could be anywhere up to like 50, $56 or something like that. And at the time, it was like, hovering around 18 to 20 or something like that. Fast forward a month and a half later, they're almost there.
Yeah.
It's pretty incredible. I'm thinking about what you're talking about when it comes to podcasting and constructive criticism, and it's so true. I mean, like, yeah, I even have my parents, my dad like give me like good tips. He's watching. He's like, well, sometimes you're talking too close to the mic and you're covering your face, or so it's so true. Like any kind of feedback that you can get that can help you tweak it a little bit and make it better, is awesome. And that's just like everything in life, and that's what's been so fun about doing a podcast, is that you learn, you create your own style as you go, you have fun with it as you get more comfortable with it.
Absolutely. 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 Do you feel like when you started until now, like you've changed course at all in terms of like where you're focusing on that surprised you?
Yeah, well, yes, in terms of, I'm starting to talk more about psychedelics and like psilocybin and like basically psychedelic treatment to treat mental illness, addiction, PTSD, because that's a whole, like, it's a similar category with cannabis, right? In that it's a plant alternative, it's holistic medicine. And so the stories that I've come across, Rena, I mean, like, I talked to Ty Burgess. I think he was episode 100, and he shares, like, he was a former hospital CEO, been in the healthcare system within 20 years, 20 plus years, pharmaceutical side. I mean, he wore every hat you could think of, and he got really ill with like an autoimmune disease, and he had like chronic pain, and so they prescribed him over 15 different medications. He was jumping between different specialists, and um, he was at a point where he said he just wanted to die. Basically, he wanted to not live anymore because he was so miserable with all of that. And so he went to an ibogaine clinic in Mexico. I think it's called Crossroads, is what he said. And there's multiple ibogaine clinics there, but basically, do you know what ibogaine is?
Yeah.
Yeah, so he did that treatment, and like completely weaned off of the opioid addiction, like had a real spiritual experience where he just kind of had a new lens and viewpoint on life, and he said he really just gave him a second chance. So after that, he left the pharmaceutical industry, started his own company, One CBD, and now he's in the cannabis CBD market.
It's
Incredible.
so wild. I mean, all the people that we've talked to, I would imagine I would imagine you have the same experience that I would say at least like 85% and probably more than that of the people I talked to got into it because of either their own ailment or somebody in like a direct family member, and just seeing like, what are we doing? What are we doing?
I
And
know.
then like the people that are really able to make a business and really and not just business but like really change the landscape has been like, it's just been monumental.
I know. And what's more powerful than like an actual testimonial from someone who
Yeah.
experienced it firsthand? You know what I mean? So it's kind of like, it's strange to me in a way where, there's still this government, regulation and their viewpoint on what these things do. When you look and you're like, okay, well, the pharmaceutical market has had a crack at this for the last, what, 30, 40 years. I mean, I don't even know how long, but like, we're seeing more efficacy and value in these treatments, than just the management of what is being prescribed within the pharmaceutical space.
Yeah, I mean, it's like what you were saying before, how cannabis is breaking the opioid addiction, or at least starting or helping to. And the same with, maybe even more so to a certain degree, in terms of like chronic dependence, not just maybe addiction, but like people's chronic dependence on not just like, the nefarious opioids, but like SSRIs. And like for some people, it's just been a total game changer, like getting off of chronic medication, period, which is, yeah, it's huge.
Yeah.
It's Yeah.
Go
Go
ahead.
ahead.
No, go ahead.
No, no. I mean, I was going to take it in a different direction, so I'm interested to hear your point on that,
well,
and then I'll get back to
well,
mine.
to I guess to wrap this up, I'll just tell you, like,
I'm not wrapping it up. I just have a slightly different point.
no, okay. So, like, I'll tell you, last night is a perfect example of my testimonial. Like okay, so I haven't had um cannabis in a while. It's been since I've gotten some. So I got some last night, and I've been starting to lift again and run. And so I was feeling very like sore, and just my muscles were aching, and I had a really long day yesterday. I had 3 podcasts, so I was just exhausted,
Wow,
you
that's
know.
a lot.
And I had a beer, on the couch, and I was just relaxing with my wife, and then I smoked a bowl, and I gotta tell you, I was like telling her, I was like, I feel 100% better. I was like, I don't feel any sores, aches, or pains. I was
Yeah,
like, I feel more comfortable and less on edge. I was like on edge earlier because when you talk a lot, like you're at a trade show or a conference, you're on all day, so it's kind of hard for you to unwind. I was completely comfortable. And then I was like feeling more loving too. Like I was hugging my dog. I gave my wife a kiss. Like I just told her, like, it's just incredible what this plant does, and I don't usually, I don't do it enough where I step back and really, kind of value the feeling, because I do it so often and it's just part of my lifestyle. But moments like that, it's really just kind of reinforces, all
it
of it.
also, how nice it is to take a break sometimes, because like it
Yeah.
really makes you appreciate when you get back to it. Like I think everything in how it works for us, and I think there's like this misnomer that if somebody is a regular cannabis user, even that people consider themselves a daily user, like there's real value, I think, in taking breaks from those days if you can, if it's not like a medical, whatever it is. um yeah, I saw somebody on Twitter saying something like that it's easy to take too much, but man, there's something really beautiful when you're taking just the right amount, and really there's like few things better than how nice that
Yeah,
is.
and that's just like everything, like you said. That's just like everything in life. You drink too much, you
Yeah,
don't get as buzzed or drunk. It becomes a problem. Opioid addiction, it becomes a big problem. Like, you can't overconsume. There's got to be a balance with everything, and that's
absolutely.
that's so important. And especially you see that with cannabis.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Yeah.
The other thing the other thing that I was gonna mention is, it's interesting that you said like the thing that you're now focusing on is psychedelics. That surprised you, because it's something that I've been wondering about. Like, for a while I've been thinking like, do we want to cover this? Don't we want to cover this? Because it really is
Yes.
like
Yes.
a sister industry. I mean, they're very closely related. Um, and I imagine like your focus, because you're focused on like the kind of holistic industry, and you're talking to people like not necessarily from an investment or a business perspective, but just about like what they're doing in regards to these like natural plants or whatever else they may be. Um,
Yeah, I want more information and
right.
testimonials and education out there that can help kind of combat or counteract the argument that's against them, and then also to maybe be like position it in a way where, hey, why don't we try this instead of what we've been doing over here? Because like you
Absolutely.
said, what we've been doing over here hasn't been working for, or it's just managing, but
Yeah.
there's consequences to that path. And so
Yeah.
and that's my, and from any perspective, whether it's investing, science, legal, I because all those disciplines add value, and it all tells that story. Ultimately, it paints that full picture.
Absolutely, absolutely. I think it's also interesting, like how it's gone down in terms of the psychedelic space. That it's much more like, it's really come out of the gate as like a mental health approach, much more than this is mushrooms are going, adult use legal, which I mean they have, but like it's much more of like a medical approach, or like a very targeted type of application that I think the psychedelics has, which I think is really interesting. I mean, I think both like what's happening on that space, and I do think probably they belong under the same umbrella. But it's interesting, like how much, we were talking about like how much cannabis is changing the face of things. Like, and I would say hand in hand, like psychedelics. Like, it's so nice to hear from people that would never in a million years consider that a legitimate, thing, and now are referencing it as like, oh yeah, I know that that's a legitimate way to treat, like,
Right. Well, it's Ty Burgess, going back to him. He kind of put it a great way. He said, there needs to be this synergy between Eastern medicine and Western medicine. He goes like, here in the West, we've kind of drifted so far away from Eastern practices, which again is more holistic, kind of plant-based medicine, whether it's psilocybin, ibogaine, ayahuasca, cannabis, right? And so he said there needs to be a balance because they both add value, but and that's a perfect example. It's like we kind of in the West, or especially in the US, we fast forwarded and demonized these plants and right away and kind of put a bad stigma on them, and now we're restarting with them, and we're taking the medicinal approach, which is what they've been doing in the East for quite some time, you know.
Yeah, absolutely. This is something like also, I mean, the other thing that I've been really focused on since we last talked is what's happening in Israel and cannabis. And
Yes.
it's so, I mean, I don't want to be totally negative because what does that do for anybody? But there's this real frustrating thing that I feel like the culture here, um, so I feel like the cannabis culture, right? Like this is talked about in terms of like cannabis culture in California is like, it's the most mature market because it's been around so long in California. And like I think the culture in they say like California sober is doing, I think, psychedelics and cannabis.
Yeah.
So it's like a real part of that culture. And I would say the same thing about, if not Israel in general, like Tel Aviv in particular is very akin to that kind of culture. That Israel's like the biggest medical cannabis market in the world, which is crazy if we're talking about the amount of people,
Yeah.
it's really like cannabis is really entrenched in this culture. And it's crazy to me why we cannot like make it adult use legal. And it's especially crazy because they announced that it's happening, and just like because more elections are happening, like it seems to be on the back burner right now. And also in terms of, they're kind of saying that it's going to roll out like the Canada model, which would be like really unfortunate. I would much rather they roll it out like closer to the California model. So um, it's funny. I think as much work as there is that we've done, like that not me, but like, the experts and the trailblazers in the industry have accomplished, there's still like so much further to go. And like what you're saying, like in terms of if everybody would understand this, and if everybody would, and I think there's real understanding of that. I think both in the States and in Israel, in terms of that need to kind of coalesce the Eastern and Western side of things to really give the body and the spirit, like to treat them as one, and to make it work the way that it should. And yet, when I feel like it comes to regulations and the legislative side, we're like way behind where the people already are. And
Right. So
yeah,
that's exactly what I was gonna ask. So like in Israel, so like from what I've heard since we've last talked, Tel Aviv is like a awesome like place to go out at night, like a kind of a party city, right? So like I'm sure.
back when the world used to look differently. Yes.
Right. Yes, yes, of course. Pre-COVID.
Yeah.
But I would imagine, cannabis use is rampant out there, right? In Tel Aviv.
Yeah.
But and so you're saying overall Israel is in public support of cannabis, but it's the legislators that are kind of dragging their feet. And if so, why, what is it? Is it that they're waiting on other countries to legalize, or are they trying to reform or make sure that their policies are in order before doing that? Or
I think honestly, like this is the more work that we need to do, like in this country. I think there is, if you talk to most young people, they're of the same mind. I remember a friend came from France, and somebody was saying that they were like going. A person that lives in Tel Aviv was saying that they're going for going to smoke a joint and go for a bike ride, like as their lunch break. And she's like, that's so Tel Aviv. Like in France, it's a glass of wine. In Tel Aviv, it's a joint.
that's
I
so
would
cool.
yeah, that's very much the culture. But there is this whole conservative side of this country, which I think is like we're constantly fighting for the soul of what this country is.
Like
And
the
I think
US in a way, kind of like the US. Wow.
absolutely, absolutely, both countries that I am a citizen of I think, are both fighting in a deep, deep way for like what they represent and what their soul is. And every time it goes one way, I think it's really scary.
Yeah.
And I think we're both experiencing that.
It's
So
going to
yeah,
be,
there's this.
yeah. I mean, this is going to be the first time in my history or living that I've lived where it's been one kind of government that's run, right? One party that's running the show. This is the first time ever. So, and is that the same case in Israel?
Unfortunately, no. We've had, I mean, I don't want to get too political, but I have been unhappy with the government for a long time, and it's a prime minister that's gotten reelected and reelected and reelected. That we've started calling him king. I mean, that's like, it's ridiculous.
Got you.
There was like this. We also keep having these elections. We're about to have our fourth in 2 years, which is insane because they can't cobble together a unified government. And the only time they were able to was right when we had an election, the government couldn't get together, they were about to break apart, and then COVID hit, and they needed to get together to, pass legislation, and so they did, but now that's fallen apart. um, so that's like the main thing. Like, we've had what I consider terrible government, and then as we've tried to get out of it, it keeps not working, and then this COVID thing happened, and it just sort of derailed
Got you.
every normal thing that's happening, and made everything like an emergency. So we'll see what happens. The next elections are in March, but I think we're really suffering from kind of this like super conservative, ultra religious type of viewpoint
Right.
fighting against. Yalla, let's move on.
Let's go. Let's evolve.
Yeah,
Let's innovate. Come on.
we did
Yeah.
that. We
Yeah.
did that. It's over. Let it go.
Well, on a happy note, here on the state politics, side, specifically in Texas, where I'm at, is so the Texas Legislature met. It's what's today, the 14th. Yeah. So they met this past Tuesday, and they're in session for 140 days. They meet every 2 years for their legislature session, and they marijuana is number 4 on the list. It's top 5. And not to say that they're probably going to go adult use right away, but they're thinking about expanding the medical program, reforming the penalties when it comes to like cannabis related crimes and whatnot. So I mean, I take that as a win for a state like Texas that's really known for being red, conservative. you know Cannabis is on top of his priority this session. It's great.
I was gonna say Texas is always a state that I read like, well, Texas isn't gonna be doing anything anytime soon. It's exciting. I think like getting top 5 in the list is like the precursor to kind of like getting past.
Yeah, yeah.
Um,
They need to take, this is what I think in Texas. They need the politicians, the Democrats need to take the position of like industrial hemp for Texas. You know what I'm saying? Because I think that will open
like
the
they did.
eyes, and it'll open the ears more of the Republican, the conservative side, because we have so much land out here, and there's no, we, as we know, there's no waste of the plant, right? So there's so many applications for hemp. When you use the herd and the fiber. And so I think that that's a huge opportunity for Texas, and I think they see that, but they should really take that kind of angle when trying to open the discussion when it comes to cannabis reform.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I also wonder, like, I mean, I don't know in Texas, like, the more I was talking, because I've done a couple interviews in the past month about like Israel and cannabis, and the more I was talking to people, another reason that I know some people like that are still on the illicit side of the market, and they were saying that a lot of the reason why they feel like it's still not going legal is because that kind of the entrenched conservative religious side like has ties in the black market, and it kind of like behooves them to kind of keep that going, and they're kind of still fighting for that in the government. And I was like, oh man, that is really depressing. And it kind of made me think of like another state that I heard from people that live there. Like, I have a bunch of family that lives in Florida, and they were saying like you can't get anything passed in Florida. Like, everything is just like, and Chicago. I'm a Chicago girl. Like, same thing about that city, and the state of Illinois. Like, it's so tough to get things passed. There's just so much like
Yeah.
dirty stuff going on underneath.
Well, New Mexico is a prime example of that, because it's been democratically held for a long time, and the Democratic Party, like especially with cannabis legalization, they're talking about it this year, but they want to control that. So like, And I don't know what all that involves because somebody that lives there actually knows the details. But what I mean in the sense is, limited licenses, tax and revenue, is kind of different than how some other states would work in more of like a private sector kind of way. So it is
Yeah.
interesting how states are adapting to this.
It is interesting, like, yeah, the notion of like being state run. Like, how do you think that that's feasible? Like, in more than a couple of states, do you think that they're going to go that approach?
I don't know. I mean, that's kind of how California is, right? In a way. Like,
Well,
or
but I mean, it's not. They're not. I mean, in terms of like the state getting money, it's happening in Colorado also. But it's not like the dispensaries aren't run by the state.
Yeah, see, I don't think so. No, no, no. I think New Mexico is kind of a unique example that way. And in some ways, look, I'm a resident of New Mexico. I was born and raised there, and a lot of that has been a detriment to the state, to be honest with you, because it doesn't provide incentive for big corporations to come in and do business. So that's kind of hurt. So I hope that wouldn't be the approach from other states, but I mean, who knows.
Yeah. It always feels like once you get the government in on that, it doesn't. It typically doesn't go well. I feel like it usually goes better when you're working like a, you know.
Right. Yeah. And this should have been passed, I mean, years ago. And I mean, Colorado is a neighboring state of New Mexico. So it's like they've seen what's been going on there. And look, New Mexico hasn't always been in the top, they've been at the bottom when it comes to a lot of different things. And so that could have been a real opportunity. And they're looking at it now, which is good. But it's been delayed. My point is because of that state run control.
Yeah, 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 yeah. It's
Yep.
interesting. I mean, I know that people are like really curious to see what happens. Like the fact that, the government in the U.S. seems so kind of friendly to cannabis. I think it's going to be really interesting to see how things play out. Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, I see it more of like a state by state approach, but it's interesting to see.
I think you're right. I think it's going to be state by state. My thing is there were a lot of promises that were made, right, during this election, and I'm just interested to see how it all pans out. Like one interesting move that I saw with the Biden administration coming in was I think that he deferred cannabis reform to his new um, attorney general who
Hmm.
who then said
Garden,
talk to the DEA, our scientists
right?
at the DEA, right? So that to me is not a good sign, but I don't know. Again, Kamala Harris has been the one that's very vocal in that administration compared to Biden when it comes to cannabis reform. So maybe she'll take a different approach, but it'll be interesting to see is what I'm saying.
Yeah, definitely. Somebody sent me a link this morning about well, for one, I agree with you in terms of Garland. That did not sound good to me either. Like that, we have to wait for the date. We want to know what's going on with cannabis based on the DEA's recommendation. Guys, what do you have for us?
Let me guess. Let me guess.
Just like heroin, sir.
Right.
Yeah,
So it's like, okay, but yeah.
yeah. But then I saw also that he's kind of like trying to bring on people that have a chorus of voices. We'll see. We'll see.
We'll see. Time will tell. But like you said, the states are going to run the show just like they've been doing. We've got what 5 states in the docket in January now. Well, five. There's more than five, but five that are most likely to go legal. I think it's New York, Virginia, New Mexico, and I can't remember the two others.
Those are the ones that I was remembering also.
Was it Rhode Island? Was Rhode Island one?
It could be It's funny. Rhode Island was the woman that I just read who the representative from Rhode Island is somebody that wants to have like a state-run kind of like dispensary system going on. Who I think Biden just I'm gonna check. That was on Marijuana Moment this morning. That Biden was talking to her about coming on board in some capacity. I don't remember who the other two were, but yeah, I mean, I feel like New York is huge. I mean, I feel like we
Huge.
saw coming when New Jersey went. But yeah, I think it's another domino. It's gonna like set another bunch of dominoes that are
Yeah.
gonna fall after it.
And Terracen will be in prime position, right? When it comes to like, I mean, because they're already a big player in New Jersey, but like once New York, I would imagine that's going to be another huge market for them.
Yeah, absolutely. I would agree. I was going to ask you actually, now that you've gotten out of your Canadian stocks, I don't know entirely, but who did you put that into in the States? Who do you like?
Oh man, all the big five, the MSO. So I have Curaleaf, True Leaf, of course, Green Thumb Industries, Terracen, Planet 13, Harvest Health, Acreage Farms, and that's
Those
pretty
are
much
pretty
it.
good. No
Oh, and
true.
I have Cresco Labs too,
Nice, nice. Illinois.
Illinois.
Uh,
Yeah.
those are good picks. Do you feel like, how do you decide like how much to put in each one, or do you put the same amount in each one?
Oh man, I no, it's just what I have to put in. You know what I mean? Like, it's yeah. I don't. I'm not. I'm just and I'm buying at the dips also. So I look to see. I'm watching very closely the price each day, and if I see a good opportunity to get in, is kind of what I'll dedicate dollars to.
So something I've been dealing with is being really frustrated with myself that I don't take more of my own advice. Like, I wish I had bought. I kind of changed my holdings also. I consolidated them more because I've been finding that I've been like so frustrated that I don't have more money. Like, I'm like,
I
I
know, me
want
too.
more money to play with.
Because you're
This
just
is,
seeing them go up every day. You're
yeah.
like, oh
And
my god.
I know what's gonna happen, people. I know what's gonna happen. Let me put it in there.
Same here. Yeah. I'm like,
Super
when is that check cleared? Okay. Yeah.
Yes, yes,
Yeah.
yes. And I see people like treating me like just bought 50,000. I'm like, oh man, like that's just, I wish I could be playing in that field. But so because of that, I kind of went deeper into what I really, really like, my core beliefs, and did that. But since then, I've been wanting to get into air strategies since I first had John on, and I'm like, I'm gonna wait. They just came to market. I'm gonna wait a little bit, and that was the wrong approach. And the ETF MSOS, which is doing crazy things, and I was waiting for an ETF to come out like that only focuses on the US space. Um, and every day I'm like, you should have gotten in, you should have gotten in, you should have gotten in.
Well, that's the thing that I was about to have FOMO. It was when we last talked, and again going back to True Leave, right? When you said that price target, and then I looked, and it was pretty. I mean, it was fairly high, right? At $18 to $20 compared to the other cannabis company MSOs in the space, right? And so I was like, but just do it, man. I mean, they're a major player. Like you said, their management team, Kim Rivers at the helm, and so I pulled the trigger, and I'm so happy that I did
That's
because
awesome.
yeah, like it's like I'm up what 132%. So
No, it's crazy. It's
it's
crazy.
insane.
It's crazy. It's crazy. It's crazy. Yeah. And it's so funny, like the trajectory of like people asking me, like, I take this, the metric is like my family members, my extended family that have no relationship at all to cannabis. And kind of like a few months ago started following me a little bit. And then like a month after that asked me what I think my top picks are. And then like a month after that just started sending me like emojis, like superlatively happy emojis.
Right, and that's going to continue to happen. I mean, it's nowhere else than up from here, right? I mean, I don't know,
Seems like it. It
like
seems like it. I mean, like I think somebody was asking me today, like, what happens if the U.S. goes federally legal, and it's like a government type of what you were talking about in New Mexico, that it goes federally legal and it's some type of government run system.
program. Yeah.
And I don't know. I mean, I guess that's possible, and I guess that really kind of deflates a lot of the bullishness on the U.S. MSOs. But like, I really don't see that happening.
No.
I think like the more I learn is just like the more that the facts are established on the ground. Like that's probably how it looks, and also just that the states, if you look throughout history and the major issues, it's been a state by state type of approach.
Yeah.
So yeah, I agree. It seems like if you're looking at a well-run, good company, it seems like green lights ahead.
Green lights ahead. Yeah, I mean, well, Todd Harrison had a good tweet. Because we're all yucking it up right now, right? It's
Yeah.
exciting. There's all kinds of momentum. Woo! Rose-colored glasses are on, right? But like, we have to also be real, and like, we did just go through a pandemic. Anything we've learned can happen, right? I mean, they're releasing the CIA is declassifying UFO information now, so it's game on. Anything can happen. And so, one thing he said that stood out to me that could be a risk is civil war, which, of course,
Damn.
worst case scenario, you know what I mean? But let's hope that, let's hope that doesn't happen. But that, could be something also with all the polarization going on. We just need a smooth transition and to get past this election and move on, you know.
Let me just say, I mean, I do not want a civil war. I am much more of a pacifist than a fighter. I mean, but I feel like even if there was, God forbid, I don't want one. But just to prove the point, everybody's going to want some cannabis.
Hey, that's actually a really good point. The consumer adoption will probably
I
skyrocket,
mean,
you know?
it's seen
Yeah,
that it's a bipartisan issue, so both sides, and
right.
like want it. I mean, that's the thing. It's like you can kind of solve for all the unknown variables, but I really feel like I think COVID is like the greatest unknown variable that has hit us.
Yeah.
And I think look what it brought. It brought like a crazy understanding of of like cannabis in a much different way that I feel like it's way more entrenched in society right now from an investor perspective, but also just like cultural, societal, anthropological. I mean, it doesn't change after this. Like it's
Right.
here. It's just a
Right.
matter of like exactly how it looks and how long it takes and stuff like that. But I mean, it's here.
Well, COVID uncovered a lot of, call them truths or eye-opening things of like, why do we do it this way, right? Why are we what? And cannabis, like you said, is one. We talked about the psychedelic space earlier, and that's why we have to go so hard pressed right now. Like we can't lose that momentum. You know what I mean? And we can't allow these governments who have kind of owned the conversation for so many years still continue to do that. And that's why it's so important with the work that we do and the people that we bring on, both you with the financial side and the business aspect of it, and mine just for more advocacy and awareness and understanding. um
Absolutely.
it's key, Rena. It's key.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, it's like I think exactly what you said is right, that we're understanding like basic truths that people need. And I think in a time where everybody has had to navigate like a different reality from what we've been used to and grown accustomed to, I think like things like cannabis and things like psychedelics, like they really help us understand where we are and what we're going through and kind of tap in and tune in. And instead of feeling stressed and tight on the couch, we're giving our partners a kiss and a hug and kind of like feel our shoulders opening up. I mean, like, I think
Absolutely.
more and more people know that.
Absolutely, yes. And it's something that is definitely being understood more and more, and it's a beautiful thing.
Yeah. Yeah, and couldn't say more about just like the important work of like highlighting these advocates and important players and people doing things the right way and just like yeah, I just echo the chorus of like wanting to support those voices and those points of activism.
Yeah. Hey, I want to ask you about a specific stock.
Do it.
Very interested about. I have so I've had him on also, Kyle Detweiler,
Oh
Clever
yeah.
Leaves.
Yeah, I just
There,
had him.
yeah, I saw your clip, and I'm gonna listen to the end. I haven't listened to the whole thing, but I will. And he and what they have going on is pretty fascinating, right? When it comes to like the low cost cannabis sector, right? And what are your thoughts? Like I've seen their price, their stock price right now, and it's kind of just been stable. Like
Yeah.
when should we kind of see a jump? Is that when, like, do you predict maybe when Mexico goes legal, or like?
So I think it's a great question, and this is a question I'm asking myself. And from like when I first started investing in cannabis stocks, Chiron was one of the first stocks. I know you've had Alvaro on your show before.
Yeah.
Um, so they also play in the same space, right? The Latin American space and specifically Colombia, and they're excited. They're both excited about Brazil, um, and even more so than Clever Leaves. I mean, Chiron's share price is also it's dropped and staying like pretty low. Um, and I've talked to Alvaro, and I just talked to their president also last week. And in talking to Kyle, I think I would say the sentiment is it's going to happen. Whether it's Mexico going legal, that definitely could be a pop. But I think like if you're talking about opening up the Brazilian markets, I think if you're opening up like exporting that cannabis, something Kyle talked about is once all the borders open up, a company like Clever Leaves, and also I would add like a company like Chiron is already situated in those places. I mean, Clever Leaves being the only one that's already GMP certified, which means it can already like bring that cannabis into Europe. So I think you're talking about like companies that are going to have first mover advantages. And somebody was telling me about the market in Israel. They were saying mostly the market in Israel, you're buying a little bit of the promise at this point, right? Because it's a nascent industry. And I would say the same thing about the Latin American region. You're buying the promise. In the States right now, you're buying a lot more than the promise, and the share prices for the most part are reflected in that. You mentioned Planet 13. I think that's an example of one that hasn't realized its share price yet in terms of the States. But I think so many have. And I think if you're looking at like a company like Clever Leaves, I mean, I think they're positioned really well. I think they have a ton of cash, managed well. I would say Mexico could see it pop, but I'm not sure that really kind of solidifies solid footing. I think that whole region kind of needs to open up, and I think also that that thesis needs to play out a little bit more for the share price to grow, which is this, because I think a lot of Americans are still raise their nose at cannabis coming out of that region, and I think that there's a real place for it, and I would say Kyle would wholeheartedly agree with that in terms of the place for extraction, and I think it makes a lot of sense. Like, why wouldn't you use lower cost cannabis for extraction purposes? There's really no reason to like use prime weed from California or whatever for that purpose. So I would agree, and I'm also bullish on that area. I think there's going to be exciting things, and I think there's a real place for it in the ecosystem. And patience.
I know. I'm like, I see all these others. I'm like, come on, Clever Leaves, just get up there. But no, that's a really good point. Like all the borders need to open, kind of for them to solidify their footing. Because you're right, they're in prime position. I mean, and they've got cash on hand, like what, $80 million or something like that.
Yeah,
So
yeah. And I think a company that's well run and already a company that's well run is going to have some cash on hand for the most part. But I think combining those two, I mean, then you can do some exciting things,
100%.
and then you're not beholden to like onerous debt. So
Yeah, no, I
but
agree.
it's exciting. Like just as we were saying, like the marker for the U.S., it's so exciting to see, like with this kind of vantage point that we're coming from now. Like I'm excited to see those different areas keep playing out. I mean, it's I don't think U.S. is the only place. It might be the most profitable, but I don't think it's the only place.
It's not the only place. Yeah. No, I mean, and Germany, from what I understand, I'm talking to Kyle, and I'm, tell me if I'm wrong, but they have like a whole like pharmaceutical program for cannabis already, don't they?
Right, that it's supposed to go through the insurance companies, and it's much easier to like get it to the patients. I think everything has just been delayed because of COVID, and things that were supposed to already be online are not. But yeah, Germany's definitely like I think people are very excited about that medical market and what they're able to do. I think some players out of Israel are going to be in there. I think some players out of Canada. Maybe did you get out of your Afria position also?
Yeah.
Getting out of Canada?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I got out of Afria.
Like
I got
Afria,
out of and Tilray.
Yeah. It'll be interesting to see if that goes down. But anyways, I imagine Afria will have a part of that German market. And then like I think Chiron, Clever Leaves, I think they're all players in that part of the world also. I mean, there's others. There's a bunch of others, but the German market is I think going to be one of the stronger medical markets in Europe. Yeah, for sure.
That makes sense. Hey, I have one more question for a specific stock. So, and I don't even know if you've heard of it, but this is when I was buying all the Canadian stocks back in 2018. What is their name? Hold on. Global Cannabis Applications Corporation. Ticker is
is crazy. That's one of the first people I interviewed, Brad Moore.
FUAPF. And I again, this was back two and a half years ago when I was making these investments, and I'm starting to remember why I did this one, and I don't know all the details. I'm still trying to do more research, but I know that they're somewhat in the crypto space, right?
God, I have to look into them more. They were not in the crypto space when I was interviewing them. But I know that but it's funny that they were just in touch with me. I need to re-look into that company. But that's a funny company to bring up because they were one of my first interviews. It's definitely, I mean, I know that somebody keeps sending me messages about them, that they're excited about them. So I think that there's something to like. I'm gonna have more information on you next time we talk, because I don't want to speak out of school, and I want to know more before I say something. But that is funny, and it's obviously supposed to be on my radar because it keeps coming back.
The universe is telling you
The
something. Yeah.
universe is telling me, girl, get to that stock. See what's going on.
They've been performing well, and I mean they're a penny stock, but like they've been really pumping it out the past couple of weeks. So
Yeah, somebody just sent me like literally a picture of their share price, just like that. Yeah, and
yeah,
it's low, but it is. It's it's
right.
on the.
It's an opportunity,
It's an
exactly.
opportunity, kid.
So what else should we cover, Rena? What are you doing? Like who are you interviewing coming up? And like what are you talking about? What are you focusing on?
Good questions. Well, my most exciting interview that I have coming up is John Sandelman, which I'm still waiting for it to happen. It was supposed to happen this week. Hopefully, it will happen soon. I'm really excited to talk to him and get caught up on what's happening over there. I have a really also a great interview, Smoke Wallen. Have you interviewed him, Smoke Wallen?
No.
He's like in the hemp, and he would be good on your show. He's like a great person to talk to, really well versed in the space. And I love an entertaining conversation. I mean, if somebody makes it entertaining and valuable, it's the best. And that's very much one of them. He was like telling us, because another person was on the call, he was telling me that chickens that are given CBD naturally produce omega 3 rich eggs. Just totally natural. Isn't that crazy?
Whoa. That is mind-blowing. Really?
It's crazy. Yeah.
Well, I
Just like
mean, we used to feed our livestock and chickens and cattle hemp back in the day, so I'm sure while we may not have known the science of that particular thing, we knew that there was some kind of value to it, right?
absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's wild. Yeah, so that's been really fun. Yeah, and I've been talking to a lot of these SPACs. We had SPAC week this week. Kyle was one of them. We
Have you
have
talked to Joe Crowthers?
I was literally just gonna say, and our upcoming one is with Joe
Yeah.
Crowder
He's
from
like Mr. Spack.
yeah,
Yeah.
he is Mr. Spack. He is Mr. Spack. Yeah, so I think just like a lot of exciting things happening, a lot of interesting people to talk to. Who do you have coming up? What do you have on the agenda?
Well, after this, I have Andrew D'Angelo.
Oh, I love Andrew.
Yes, I'm so excited to talk with him and all the great work that the Last Prisoner Project is doing when it comes to social equity and justice reform. Uh,
Absolutely.
so that'll be a good conversation. Who else? Who else?
It's
I I talked to Anthony Pompliano, and his episode will actually publish before this. But I don't know if you know who he is, but he's a
I saw
huge
him.
yeah, he's a huge like player in the Bitcoin space, but he really has his eye overall on the financial and business markets and whatnot. He's been featured on CNBC several times, and I actually went to college with him. We were in the same
Oh,
fraternity.
that's
So,
funny.
I reached out, and he was kind enough to come on and share his thoughts when it comes to the cannabis industry and the market and the psychedelic market as well, because he's had some guests on his podcast that are focused on psychedelics. He had the CEO of Compass Pathways on.
Oh,
Um,
nice,
yeah.
nice.
So that, and then who else? Let me see. I know that I just have, they just get scheduled, so it's not a bad problem to have.
No, it's not.
Um,
It's funny. You were talking about block. Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, and Rosie Matteo is going to be a great one. So
Oh, from Matteo Communications.
Matteo Communications, one of the leading PR firms in the cannabis space. Yeah.
Nice, nice,
Uh,
nice.
so I'll be excited to talk with her also.
That's cool. I was gonna say, like, talking about the blockchain and the cannabis intersection. I mentioned, like, I was talking to Chris Naprawa, who's the president at Chiron. He also is now the president at Tal, which is like a blockchain company, and that was like a really, like how I said about Smoke Wallen, like interesting and informative. It was the same type of thing, like just really, really interesting. The applications of blockchain and cannabis and the similarities, I think, between the industries, just like game changing, paradigm shifting, about to explode, about to change the face of like the world and how we see it and use it and know it. And Yeah, there's some exciting things
That's
happening.
awesome. You know what? I want to start. I'm gonna start sharing those also. I know that I follow you, of course, on Twitter, but those are really good guests. So I'll be sure to look out and give you a retweet so
Thanks,
that
man.
we get the word out there. That's the ultimate goal.
That is the ultimate goal. Yeah, let's do some mutual reciprocation tweeting. I'm
Absolutely.
down. I'm
Twitter's
down.
so fun, isn't it? It's kind of gotten back to normal now that Trump's off of it because it was a big fight. It's always been kind of a big fight, and there still is. This has to completely pass, but I'm looking forward to just like a Twitter where funny thoughts, investment tips and banter back and forth.
I agree. It's funny. My Twitter is very, very curated. I am extremely selective of the type of political content that I consume. I mean, I consume very little of it because I just think that it like is driving us all mad.
It is,
So my
yeah.
Twitter feed is actually like it's pretty far from I would say most people that are paying attention to the world. Like I consider myself somebody that's paying attention to the world, but for somebody that is right, it's very curated. So it's a lovely place for me to be. And
I,
actually, I was thinking,
I'm
yeah, go ahead.
scaling. I'm scaling back on mine now. Now that the election's over, and I'm scaling back on the political pundits a
It
little
will do.
bit. So
I predict it will do you good. But like
yeah,
around the time of the holidays and the new year, when we're feeling very reflective and like sentimental, and I was thinking like LinkedIn and Twitter have been just crazy positive experiences for me. I would say like since I launched this podcast and just like the people. I mean, I met you through one of them, I think,
yep,
and just the kind of people that I'm meeting and able to talk to, and the support and the constructive criticism, and it's really their worlds unto themselves, and provide me a ton as much as I get in the real life. So
I
it's
know.
if not much more in a lot of respects. So I love Twitter. I love LinkedIn. I think they're like great platforms, and they can really like change your whole life in term if you open up to the possibilities there.
I agree. LinkedIn has been so good to me. I
Yeah.
cannot complain. I mean, I've gotten, clients. I've gotten jobs. I've got, it's a great platform to really showcase your work and really market yourself. From a professional standpoint. But then you also have those people that unauthentically try to connect with you. Hey, I really like what you're doing, or they send you those messages and then they try to sell you, so you got to be wary of that. But hey,
Yes.
it is what it is,
Yes. I was born wary, so there's no issue there.
Awesome. Rena, well, it's always a pleasure to talk with you. I really enjoyed this. I needed this. It's been too long.
I agree, man. I agree. And it's
Yeah,
great to see you out there doing important things. I know that you were out there at a conference in Texas and building your business, and it's awesome to see you doing good things and expanding. And I'm always happy to be on your podcast with you. It's just always a great conversation, much like your other great conversations. But it's always fun to join you. So I appreciate it, man.
thank you, and I appreciate you and all the work you're doing at Seeking Alpha, and with the Cannabis Investing podcast. If y'all haven't listened to it, definitely check it out. It's everywhere, right? Apple
It's everywhere,
Podcasts,
everywhere you want to
Google's,
be.
Spotify. So yeah, keep up the great work, Rena. We'll talk again next month, and let's talk more about how these stocks are skyrocketing. Hopefully.
Let's do it. Looking forward to it. Stay well until then.
Okay, you too.
All right.
Thanks
Peace,
for
brother.
listening, everyone. Bye.
Thank you for listening. Hit us up. Talk to us. Let me know. Whatever you want to say, I'm here for it. Thanks, everybody. Thanks, Kevin.
Bye.